Hi, I want to make a video on the subject of hopes, the purpose, seeing the purpose in others. I think I've mentioned this before, unless I was just on the notes and thinking I made a video about it, and their storied pasts and how it's all a perception. So I mentioned this before in another video where you have the purpose and seeing purpose in others, but your purpose is to kind of take that purpose away from them because realizing the purpose that you have is kind of usually frivolous, pointless, and it's usually negative and bad and doesn't do anything to accomplish anything in any way, shape, or form other than for your own good and your own ambitions. And if your ambitions are, say, by proxy helping other people, and that's just part of the mechanism, then that's good. And if you have it happen accidentally, but obviously things such as intention, can become relevant depending on the situation, the circumstance. But besides the point, seeing the hopes and purposes in other people and how that can have some meaning. It can, but it's about using what purpose you have to make it better for everyone else, regardless of the knowledge they have that it's better for them. Using their ignorance against them in a way, or using that to your advantage, to make sure that it's better for everyone, and seeing that no one's in pain. And that's really the only way we can do it, is to reduce the amount of suffering that we can have, and seeing the purpose, regardless of that purpose, even though that may be causing them suffering because they lack a purpose. And once they recognize it, you're doing it for the better good, because you're not going to create as many victims in many circumstances. You're going to make it better as a whole. Um, a little psychological tension is far better than, say, suffering because of, say, some silly action you may have taken otherwise. It's obviously better to convince people of the truth more and let them get comfortable with that and live their lives in a better way and more comfortably to, say, that different circumstance of knowledge, of knowing the truth, than, say, living in your ignorance and causing all sorts of other problems that you may have had to begin with. So, yeah, all this stuff is relevant. Um, so yes. So yeah, so many people live, and I've mentioned this before along with this, how people have hopes and purposes, and they see meaning in their storied lives and having a story to tell. Living is a badge of honor. I've mentioned this before, and I've mentioned how people love living in their glory. It's about glory and dignity and pride and shamelessness, not being ashamed, having something to look back at, say what surname you have, your lineage, your past, your ethnicity, whatever it is that you find pride or dignity in, or what you find some purpose in, something that you take as a badge of honor, something that you enjoy, and you look back and use it as a form of your identity, as a part of your identity. And many of these things are the things that give people purpose and hope, because they see hope in this driving mechanism of some kind of frivolous things, such as, say, lineage or your past, or how you can use that past to do what beyond a certain point. You're going to have a past, to die in the past, to have a die in the future, to let that be in the past. No longer you are having a perception of your entire life, therefore it means nothing in the end. It means something to the life game, but once you are living, now that you're dead, the game means no more at that point. It meant something in the past when you were living, but at this point, once you die, it doesn't mean anything. It meant something, and it still means something is an idea. What happened to you meant something. It means something as an idea, but it doesn't mean anything at this point when it comes to the fact that it was part of the past. It means something. That's why it's used in past tense. It meant something in the past. As opposed to it means something as a whole, as an idea. Value means something as a vague idea of understanding sentient feelings, and better and positive, knowing that you have to experience to understand it, as opposed to meant something in the past no longer meaning something. So it's all frivolous and pointless to begin with. How it's all a perception, a projection of your own psychology, how it is, even though your psychology is all you have. I mean, obviously that's something, that's a little key point you have to consider when you think about these things, but it does mean something regardless. It has meaning regardless of the fact that um, regardless of the fact that you have a perception or whatever it may be. It means something, because your perception is the only thing you have. Your point of view, your experience, your sentient point of view, how you're viewing things, how you're experiencing things, how you're perceiving things. It means something, but it's going to mean something. It's going to have meant something once it's already passed. It meant something before, but as an idea, what experienced, generally speaking, it means something. So it means something when you're making something experience a negative sensation, but it's going to have a better outcome, and it's about weighing these different possibilities and all these different weights where you consider which one's going to be more worth it and which one's going to be more of a waste of time, and so on and so forth. I mean, many of these things, um, many of these things, like I mentioned, the superficial things that we find satisfaction, and they have a certain degree of value at a certain point in time, but the value usually in many cases leads nowhere. It doesn't go anywhere. It usually leads a dead end. You see the mirror, the reflection in the mirror, and you say, "Oh, isn't that so beautiful?" So beautiful, so you can get laid or whatever it is that you want to satisfy. Your ego gratification, your physical gratification to do then what? Make a mistake and have a child? Oops, I didn't put my condom on right, therefore, oops, it wasn't really worth it in the end. I ended up making a mistake because I got a little too hedonistic and made a mistake, or whatever it may have been. In many cases, all the things that we find pleasure in are usually negative things. They're indulgences, and these indulgences only lead to, generally speaking, more problems. But the indulgences is what we're driving towards. That's what we find life worth living, but they're the things that in many cases cause problems, drive the passions, crimes of passion, understanding those circumstances, how it revolves around all these different things, and how it's just a constant battle and constant um, measuring where you're constantly weighing the outcomes and possibilities. And if in generally cases if not worth taking, it's usually because it's a very high passion, or it's not necessarily passion, but it's riskier. In many cases, riskier behavior is usually something that drives off of indulgence and hedonism or whatever it may be. Generally speaking, obviously not in all cases. But I think you can understand, generally speaking, what I'm saying. Um, so, yes, I mean, really, that's it. The hopes and purpose in others and their storied pasts. Many people live in their past. Many people like living in their glory days, all the good guys, all the guys that have obviously accomplished so much in their life, look back at high school as their glory days and their storied past. That means absolutely nothing now. I mean, it meant something then, but the storied past was pathetic to begin with, and now it means nothing, and it meant something, but it didn't mean much to begin with, so what is it now? It doesn't mean anything, and once you die, that perception, you're not going to even have the perception or the memory of that anymore. So at that point, it's left to history. What did Einstein do in his off time when he was in that bedroom that one time? We'll never know. Even if he was in a bedroom that was made up, who knows what happened? We don't know every second of every person's life on Earth or experience, and there's only so much we can do to chalk it up to the past and to say, that horrible thing happened, but no one made light of it, therefore it's something that happened, no more. Happened and it was gone and didn't do anything. It just had its short-lasting effect, and then whatever. I mean, someone could have got horribly murdered somewhere, no one noticed it, and there's just a pile of bones 500 years later when someone noticed. I mean, in many cases, that's what happens. It almost makes it seem like you're belittling existence in life and how, the value of things can be undermined in many cases. I mean, even just describing something slightly um, glibly or slightly passively, I mean, it makes something serious seem um, very pointless and silly and frivolous and didn't mean anything to begin with. But it still meant something. Wasn't something that was completely belittled in its description, but in many cases, descriptions don't necessarily describe the circumstance. They describe a person's perception of their circumstance. And in many cases, people's perceptions of other people's circumstance are not the same as their own, because that's the ego machine as well. Your ego machine does what? It makes you want to prop yourself up for things that are related to you. If it's not you, it has to be your family. If it's not your family, it has to be your friends. If it's not your friends, it has to be your country or your town or your city or your state or whatever it is. And obviously you have to be the core of that because you have to be included because it gives you a sense of identity and relation and ego gratification of satisfaction of your own ego because it has to do with you and your perception and your interaction based on your environment and how you've experienced your life, and it has to be because of you. It revolves around you. Have everything revolve around you. And when all these things are revolving around each other, obviously it's going to come into conflict every once in a while. So that's something we have to, kind of deal with, unfortunately, but we can try our best to, like I mentioned before, mitigate it. And that's all we can do our best at. We can try our best and mean it. We can try our best, do our best that we can do based on trying our best to do it and achieve it to begin with, to do our best. Um, 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 and such. Um, anyway, so yes, obviously, when I mentioned before, just go back to the idea real quick, ego and having a person's story about themselves be different, obviously, that's a motivating factor. And like I mentioned, it spreads out. If it can't be you, it's your cities. If you can't take direct credit for something, like I mentioned before, it goes to somewhere else. It has to do with you, your nationality, your ethnicity, your identification with this, that, or the other thing. I'm a this fan, I'm a this state, I'm a this country, I'm a this color, I'm a this language, I'm a this, and it just ends up meaning nothing in the end because there's just so many different distinctions and pointless, frivolous, crappy, silly, nonsensical little comparisons and distinctions you can make that end up meaning nothing in the end because there's just too damn many of them. You're a distinct human being or sentient being, and just take enough pride in the fact that you can accomplish something that you do with effort and practice or whatever it is that you can do to accomplish something. There's nothing more you can do, and taking pride in anything else isn't really, it's kind of just silly. Pride is part of the same mechanism that's driving us forward. It's part of the same game of against our will, but it's still something you have to do on the same level of against our will and knowing that you've taken credit for something that you've actually earned. You've earned it. It's against your will, because it was going to happen, but it was still you going through the sentient experience to get that. Therefore, you can have the sentient experience of, say, taking pride in something, which really, in the end, doesn't mean anything, because taking pride only is a little, ooh, 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 double rainbow, stroking off your little micro penis kind of sensation. Doesn't really do anything. And once you've satisfied yourself, like I've mentioned before, what's there left? There's a nap in between your satisfaction and your satisfaction again. I can't wait to eat again after I've just eaten. I'm hungry. I can't wait to eat again. Oh, I can't wait to stroke my little micro wiener, my little hot dog, my little sausage, and then I can't wait to what? Oh, I can't wait to go out and party. Oh, I can't wait to do this and do that. I mean, it's just an endless cycle of nonsense and bibble babble and this is pointlessness everywhere. And once this pointlessness, um, and you have it, it's not a detriment in many ways. It's for the good. It's for the good of everyone because you're going to be preventing more pain and suffering. Even if you're suffering yourself, you're going to be preventing more suffering in the future from just having this perception, even though it's negative. But also, not only that, but once you know the truth, you don't want to know the truth. You don't want to seem stupid or ignorant. You'll say, oh, I was so ignorant then. If you start off from a very bad place, you were, say, a Christian, now you're not a Christian, and now you realize how stupid you were. You were religious before, you were dogmatic, the theistic, and so on and so forth, deistic. Now you look back and you say, God damn, I was stupid. And once you know the truth, not only that, you're not only comparing how you were before, but you don't want to be stupid anymore. And now the perception is not only that you have that perception in your mind, and now that perception is ingrained, and you don't want to lose it because that knowledge is useful. Not only that, it's part of your identity now. That's something you want to use to the better good. And once you know the better good, you know that knowledge is only for the better good, even if it's painful. So having that knowledge is for the better good not only of you, and you'll be satisfied with it, but for everyone else. It may be painful, it may be too much of a burden, but that burden is only doing the better good for everyone else. And that's where the burden has its meaning. And then back to the purpose and seeing others' eyes and so on and so forth. So your storied past, your badges of honor, like I've mentioned before, don't mean much of anything. They're kind of pointless, frivolous, and stupid, and they don't accomplish anything. Storied past, it meant something. Your past means nothing. You're doing it. You're gratifying your own self, ego gratification, and you're belittling everyone else's. Like I mentioned, belittling a circumstance regardless of what happened. You're going through a person's perception and not the actual circumstance that actually existed and the value that actually was experienced during that event. You're only getting someone's interpretations that are being sent to your interpretations based on their interpretation and explanation of something that already happened, instead of getting your direct interpretation, which isn't necessarily the same thing of exactly what happened, because in many cases you have your own biases and things that get in the way. Not only that, you just don't know the experience because you're not living the experience. You didn't live the atom for photon experience of the person that you're, say, understanding or seeing or perceiving. is experiencing, other than, say, seeing it directly or implying or understanding what have happened based on something that you can understand based on indications from and implications from, say, something that happened before, like crime scene investigation or something. So I guess that's all I want to mention. I've babbled on long enough, and if I have, like I mentioned before, if I have anything else to say, I'll mention it in another video. So don't worry if I didn't mention everything or I missed a crucial and important point. I can always mention it later on. So yes, thank you, and if I have anything else to mention, I'll mention it then. So see you next time. Bye.